Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Ruth and I will be presenting on Chapter 4. One of the biggest issues in evaluation is choosing the right methods to collect the data that you have identified as needed. Too often, someone will say, "We want to do an evaluation. We will do a survey." This is a case of being method focused rather than focusing on the information need itself. There are 3 ways to collect data through interviews, focus groups, and observations. There are 2 major types of interviews: key informant interviews and cognitive interviews. Key informant interviews depends on open-ended questions. The respondents has been chosen because of their knowledge in the area of interest. Cognitive interviews are less common. The main goal of cognitive interviews are to understand the recipient's response to stimuli. This method is more used in the formative testings of information materials. Next, there are variations in collections of interviews. These 4 types of dimensions are structure, number of participants, mode of administration, and stimulus. First, I'll explain to you what each one is, and then I'll have a chart that shows you how these methods are applied in key informant interviews and cognitive interviews. First, structures of the interviews sets the tone. This all depends on how we word questions, if these questions are written out beforehand or asked as the interview progresses. There are unstructured, semi-structured, and highly structured interviews. Unstructured interviews contains probing, where the researcher follows the lead of the respondents and elicits additional details. Semi-structured interviews, the words are carefully chosen and made available in a protocol. Terry Weddle says interviews are responsible for wording questions if needed. Structured interviews, questions have to be asked in a sequence. Highly structured interviews, the interviews is able to jump around and return to questions as needed. Next, we have number of participants. Interviews can be done in pairs, one interviewer and one interviewee. It can be done in large groups or have multiple interviewers. The advantages of having multiple interviewers is they can debrief each other and give clarification or new insight, keep track of key questions or questions unanswered by the interviewee. The second interviewer can help set up the interview. Can you guys think of instances where second interviewers can be handy? Next, we have mode of administration. This is how the interviews get their information from. Interviews can be done in person or by phone. Web-based is a good follow-up, but not a good main way to get information, because if there are some questions that are open-ended, then it may be tedious for the respondents to respond online by. Here we have different modes of administration: stimuli, focus groups, and observations. Stimuli is used to help engage the interviewee and hope to give better realistic answers. In stimulus, vignettes are storytelling, giving examples to help provocate without being offensive to the recipient. Next is focus groups. It is usually classed in semi-structured interviews. Groups of people are asked about their opinions. Fun fact, the first focus groups were created at the Bureau of Applied Social Research in the USA by Associate Director Sociologist Robert K. Merton. Focus groups are divided into 2 groups: focus groups, which are compiled of strangers, and groups, which are people that know each other. Usually, focus groups are best used in research because these are strangers and they're more willing to give honest opinions about things than interviewing groups of people where they may not be so candid in their responses. Lastly, we have observation, which is simply using your senses to gain information. This is not asking someone questions, but using your sense of smell, your hearing, your eyes to experience what happened. And here is a chart comparing key informal interviews and cognitive interviews. So, for example, structure. In key informant interviews, there are unstructured, semi-structured, and highly structured interviews versus cognitive interview who are only structured. Cognitive interviews are best designed as structured because they want to see the reaction of the respondent to the specific stimuli. And for example, another, probing. Probing is usually done in unstructured interviews, and it is usually done a lot in cognitive interviews. In conclusion, the advantages of having a variation is that it forces you to think of the objectives of your task, the questions you want answered, and information you need before deciding on a method. Different methods provide different types of data for different purposes. It also helps validate your findings as well. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot from my presentation, and thank you for your time.